Mine eyes have seen the glory of the daily solutions. They are here to give the answers to your flotation questions. Even if they don't know what they're saying in most situations, their advice goes marching on.
I think we one-took that intro. That's good. This is a good one. This is Graham over here.
This is Ashkahn.
And
our question,
our
question
is burnout, burnout, slams head against keyboard, burnout. There were a couple asterisks in there too that I didn't know how to pronounce.
All right. Well, sounds like this person's asking about burnout.
I'll infer a question from that.
Let
Yeah.
me assume here.
Yeah. So burnout in a float center is very real. It's not an easy job, especially if you're the only one running it, or you and one other person are the only ones running the float center and doing everything behind the scenes and all the marketing. And
I'm tired just talking about this right now.
And especially if you've just come out of construction. I think burnout really hits hard in the first couple years, especially, or depending on how your construction process went, immediately upon opening. Getting to opening your doors is one of the craziest things that a lot of people have ever done in their lives, much less over the course of just the length of a float center. So, yeah, it's a crazy business.
And it's hard, it's long hours. It's better for float centers to be open for a good chunk of the day. So that can contribute to being in your shop a lot. And just things break a lot more than you really want them to.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you don't ever want them to break, but you kind of assume in most businesses there's going to be some general maintenance and things breaking and stuff like that.
Or you don't assume that, then boy, is it really a shocker when you run a float center,
But it's just shocking the speed and frequency with which something is messed up or broken or needs attention with regards to your float tank or your float room. And I think that is one of the things that can really easily lead to burnout. You're just like, oh my God, that's broken too now. So I get that. I get it.
So, so the number one thing that helps, I think, is floating, and preferably in someone else's float tank. If you can go float at another center across town and do that on a regular basis, often that's a great way to get over burnout for your own center.
And having other people there to be a part of this with you, if you're getting super burned out, the right time to start getting someone else trained up on things was probably months ago. But, the second best time is right now. And that just helps a lot when you actually can take a break, when you can actually just be like, you know what, I'm just going to take a week off. Having the ability to do that, I think the best thing to solve burnout is just to actually not work for a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And definitely just in the clinical side of things, it's one of the only things that's been shown to relieve burnout symptoms as far as the actual, psychological impact of burnout is taking days off, and often about a week and a half, which as a small business owner feels like way too much time to be away from your business. So I think a lot of people never actually recover from a lot of those burnout symptoms, unfortunately, when you're kind of deep in your own business world.
So that's an important one, or just maybe being willing to give up a little bit of trust in making sure everything is exactly the way you want it, and putting a little bit more trust into somebody else to run things, even if you don't quite feel ready. It might be worth it to have a little bit less on your plate and get a little bit of time to actually get away from the business.
Yeah, and I don't know how to describe a certain kind of mentality too, and it depends on how long you've been in business too. I think there's kind of different forms of burnout almost that come, and this is very unclinical. I don't know if there's actually different categories of burnout, but in a float center at least, there's kind of burnout from decision fatigue and all the new things you have to do when you're just starting up, and this whole vast array of responsibilities that you're faced with. And then there's burnout that's 5 years down the road, where you've just been doing the same things over and over again for so long that kind of starts to take its toll as well. And maybe they have kind of different...
If you were to have to do a podcast every day.
Every single day.
It really just starts to add up.
Yeah, if you don't have something like a new intro to keep you occupied, it'd really be a burden. Right, but so if you're burnt out from doing the same thing over and over again for years, that's where bringing on someone else to help out can be really nice. And at the beginning, if it's decision fatigue and there's just so much going on, maybe that's where you need to actually take a couple days off to go on a hike, even if it means just scheduling your center to be shut down, or a couple weeks out of a few months, take a few extra days off so your center's not open 7 days a week, if that's what you're doing right now, is working 7 days a week. So even though I guess it feels like your business always needs as much time as you can throw into it because you need as much revenue as possible to keep going, to make those next steps, just recognize you're a fallible human being. You're a soft, fleshy creature, and you need to take care of yourself as well.
And things are generally not quite as critical as you may think they are. That's what I found. Something in my mind feels like make or break, and at the end of the day, it's usually probably not. If you were to shut your float center down for a week, it really probably would not be the end of the world. Or if you were to be closed 2 days a week instead of 1 day a week for the next month, these things probably are going to actually have less of an impact than you suspect they will.
Yeah, and especially if you're not at 100% capacity, you have a little emptiness in your schedule. Closing for 1 extra day probably means a lot of those people are going to shift around their appointments to be on the days that you're open and might fill in some gaps, especially if you're not closed on the weekends or Friday, which totally advise not closing during those days.
And, maybe it's at the point where you're willing to take less money home yourself in favor of paying that money to an employee to take off some of those shop hours off your shoulders, and the free time is worth more to you than taking more of a monthly income home.
Yep. And it's not, always working harder and trying to just push through burnout is, again, not the way you're going to solve it. Continuing to work harder, and if you're feeling psychological stress, just trying to bear it and, bite down on the mouthpiece and push forward is absolutely not what will ultimately solve the problem. So also just keep in mind that you will probably need to do something different than what you're doing right now, even if it is a day off.
Or sometimes a change of context helps a lot. Go to the coast or whatever, drive somewhere out of town for a little bit. Little things like that can just put you in a much different mental state, just from the nature of the fact that everything around you is different than your kind of daily routine.
Yeah, for sure. And again, go float. Go hop in float tank. I said other people's float tanks because when you're burnt out, sometimes being in your own float tank is the last thing you want to do. And you hear a weird clicking noise and you're like, great, now there went the next 3 hours of my life because I need to deal with that, So, yeah, I've said it before, but if you hear a clicking noise in someone else's float tank, you get to get out of your float, leave, and at the front desk say, hey, your float tank's clicking, see you later, and that's the end of your interaction.
What else is useful is going and grabbing drinks with the other float centers in your town. There's nothing like some good catharsis by being able to just vent. You'll tell people about how crazy everything's been for you, and they'll tell you stories that'll make you be like, oh man, I'm so glad I didn't have to deal with any of that.
Yeah.
So they're I always come away from a night of drinks with other float centers feeling okay, I guess I didn't have hit every single stumbling block. Everyone has some list of random crazy scenarios that's happened to them they've had to deal with.
Yeah, and if you don't have local float centers to go grab drinks with, give us a call. We'll figure
fly
something
out there,
out. Yeah. Okay, is that it? Stick with it. Things will be okay. Don't
chin up.
Yeah. Just keep bearing it, grit along.
Yeah, get your head down and just power through.
All right, thanks for the question. And honestly, it's not an uncommon thing that float center owners are dealing with. So maybe not as technical as some of our answers, but a very real issue in the float tank world, and something that you should actually put some thought into how you're going to deal with in your own life when it comes up. I mean, it's probably not just the float tank world. I bet any small business owner at some point has to deal with some serious burnout. It's just not an easy position to be in charge of.
Oh yeah,
the outcome and the life of a company. It's inherently stressful. So you're certainly not alone.
All right. If you guys have other questions, or if you're just frustrated and need someone to talk to, you can go to floatanksolutions.com/podcast. Those go straight to us.
Yep, and our parents who also review every single question that comes through and kind of advise us on which ones to take.
Yeah, that's it.
All right. Bye, everyone.